Welcome to another edition of the Dakotan's Election Central, where we are comprehensively covering the 2024 North Dakota election cycle. I'm Jonathan Starr. Today we are joined by Amber Vibeto. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to jump into a resolution that is being proposed at the Indy GOP State Convention coming up in April, the first Saturday in April. But before we talk about that resolution, let's talk a little bit about you and your background in politics in Minot and in North Dakota.
Okay, well, so I am a former district chair in District 3, but I am the current vice chairwoman of District 3, and I'm also the co-founder and executive director of North Dakota CAN. So, okay. And it's a nonprofit conservative organization and it helps people get involved in the legislative session.
Okay, absolutely. Seems like there's been a big rise in that over the last about 4 years of organizations rising, trying to promote awareness.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit of what you guys do through IndyCan?
Yes, it is. COVID was a big awakening for a lot of people, and that's kind of what motivated us at first. But we've since kind of taken on other issues, and Gotcha. Here we are.
There you go. So one of the issues that at least you are supporting is this resolution in support of establishing equal protection for the unborn. Before we jump into the resolution itself, kind of talk about the background of why this came up, why this has become a passion of yours, and why you're fighting for it.
Sure. Well, I was asked to be a part of the resolutions committee. And so I started thinking about, just what are the issues of our time right now that really need to be addressed, especially in our Republican Party. The life issue is something that's always been important to me. It's always been a big part of who I am, very pro-life. But I've always kind of noticed just an inconsistency in the movement, just as far as their stance. And especially right now with leading Republicans right now, they're very inconsistent. For example, Donald Trump has talked about a 15-week ban, and he's very amenable to, negotiating.
Right.
And so in my mind, I think that as Republicans, we need to be more consistent in our messaging and know why we believe what we believe. And so contrary to just the claims out there, we do not have an abortion ban in North Dakota. It's illegal for doctors to perform abortions and to prescribe abortion pills, but we do have carved out specifically for women a right to kill their unborn child. And so what this resolution attempts to do is pave the way for legislation, hopefully, so that the unborn are protected equally. So the same laws that protect you and I would protect the unborn.
Gotcha.
So.
Very good. And so talking about the resolution as its purpose for a moment, this isn't going to change any legislation that's in place.
No.
This isn't going to create a new century code law or anything like that. This is simply something that is shown by the Republican platform, something that we get behind, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep. This is my attempt to unify Republicans under the principles that we say that we believe.
And so it will be voted on at the state convention April 5th or 6th.
Yes.
I think it needs a 2/3 majority to pass.
Correct.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So basically, this will be presented to all the delegates there. They'll vote. If it passes, it'll be by the 2/3 majority, and then it could set the tone, which would be the hope for legislation in this upcoming session or whatever.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Well, there's been some people that are for this, but there's also, as is typical in North Dakota politics, some people that are strongly against it. So what I think would be interesting is just to go through it line by line and kind of take a peek at some of the main parts of it and what maybe people are saying against it, but also why it's important that it's a part of it.
Sure.
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
So, if to our viewers, if you're looking for a copy of it, we will make sure that there's someplace that you can find the full resolution. But it just begins very simple. Whereas all human beings are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, the foremost of which is the right to life. And whereas the 14th Amendment affirms the right to life with the following guarantee, nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the law. I think right here would be a good place to kind of just butt in. Here we're just taking the Constitution right here.
Yes. Yep.
And we're not trying to go and reinvent anything. That's not kind of the goal of this.
Correct.
It's just the biggest conversation comes down to when is life done, and obviously from this it would be perceived that life begins at conception.
Yes.
Absolutely. So that is talked about in the next line, whereas the life of every human being begins at fertilization, and whereas the right to life should be protected regardless of a human being's size, stage of development, environment, degree of dependency, or circumstances surrounding conception. And again, here we have pretty basic terminology being used. And we're getting close, and I have a few things highlighted and a few talking points further on. We're getting close to the talking points. Yes. But we start out most people can get behind this. They should be able to get behind this if they believe that abortion is wrong. And obviously there has to be the agreement on where life starts.
Right. Well, and some people, they do have an issue with the rape and incest, exceptions.
Right. Yep.
They want to make exceptions for how a person is conceived.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's, and so you are wanting to put basically stop to that, where every life is treated the same. It doesn't matter how you were conceived.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And that's how we want to treat people in our daily interactions. So why would it be any different when they're in their mother's womb? Whereas abortion is an act of violence that purposefully and knowingly terminates the life of a human being inside the womb. And whereas unborn human beings are entitled to the full and equal protection of the laws that prohibit violence against other human beings. And we're going to include one more portion because I think this is the one that has begun to create some conversation. And whereas establishing equal protection for the unborn requires that anyone who kills a preborn human being is legally answerable for the crime, whether they be a principal offender, accomplice, or co-conspirator of the act. So this goes pretty deep right here.
Yeah.
It's not just the mom's responsible or anything like that. This is trying to outlaw the ability, or at least bring, this specifically won't outlaw, but bring awareness that it doesn't matter where you stand on this, where you're a part of it, you're responsible.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it just means that it should be illegal for everyone to kill anyone. That includes the pregnant mothers.
Right.
It should be illegal for them to kill their child.
Right.
As of right now, it's not in North Dakota. They have that right, especially carved out for them within Century Code. So
there's the conversation. Typically, one of the bills that come against it is that's their body, right? Their body, their right. What do you say to people that bring up that?
Well, it's not just their body. There's a whole separate body. Yeah. Their child, their own flesh and blood. So, and it's really, we're not probably going to win over any pro-choice people, and we do sometimes, but really this is kind of a disagreement between what we call the pro-life versus the abolitionist viewpoint. Right. We want to abolish abortion. We don't want to regulate abortion.
Right.
But the pro-life side, their main doctrine is that women are victims of abortion. And it is true that women suffer terribly after they have abortions. Many women do. There is great guilt and shame, and they should be offered compassionate post-abortive care. There's no question about that. There's grace and forgiveness in Jesus Christ. But just because they suffer from having abortion, that doesn't mean they are victims of the decision that they made. And, there are people who commit murder of born human beings who they're very sorry for what they did, and they have to live with what they did for the rest of their lives. We don't deny the murder victim justice because the perpetrator feels guilt.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting if you go to a hospital and you go to the baby ward, and it depends on the hospital and stuff like that, but security is pretty tight typically as soon as they're born. But basically we're not worried about that up to that point. But as soon as they're born, we're going to make sure that they don't get kidnapped by somebody that's stealing babies out of the baby ward or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you bring up the great point that we're not really talking about a pro-choice versus pro-life. This is more a conversation between people that are believing pro-life. What is it going to take in order to get people that are feeling like Donald Trump 15 weeks or wherever he stands at the current time, to get those people on board with the idea that it just needs to be abolished?
Well, I think the big game changer in the fight against abortion is the abortion pills and access to abortion pills. Women have access to abortion pills through online clinics. There are shield laws in about 6 states that protect doctors in those states from any kind of criminal litigation or liability. They can prescribe abortion pills to women in states like North Dakota that have a near abortion ban. There are international clinics. There's a Mexican organization that ships pills. They even have community networks of volunteers that ship pills anonymously. So women are still getting their hands on abortion pills.
Right.
And so abortion is very likely still happening within North Dakota. And this is really unfortunate for the women as well, because these pills are incredibly dangerous.
Right.
And these women go through a lot of physical pain and suffering after taking these pills. And we should be protecting women from that too. We obviously want to protect the life inside of her, but we care about the woman as well.
Right. Absolutely. So we have those outside, almost called it probably wouldn't be very nice to call this, but a black market where if your state's not allowing it, and we've seen that with other things that have happened within states. There's not much jurisdiction that the state would have beyond the state. Correct? If somebody orders something from Mexico, you're not about to cut that off, basically.
Yeah, I mean.
So I guess my question is not my point, because it's not a point at all. It's a question. Is what would be this goes passes the NDGOP convention next Saturday. What would be the perfect outcome, the ideal outcome from something like that?
Well, I mean, I would love to see a bill of equal protection put forward. As far as the details of how, that would be implemented, that's a whole other conversation. I think that it just, in its most basic sense, it just needs to be outlined that it's illegal for women to kill their babies, their unborn babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then I go back to this. What is it going to take to get it passed, to get the majority of the Republicans on board with that? Do you feel like it's far off? Do you feel like you have a strong base that's going to be there, or what? If there's somebody that's on the fence about it, what's the message to them to get them to come to this side?
Well, I'm not really sure. I feel like maybe it might be a long shot at this point, but I do think that this is the future of the pro-life movement.
Yeah.
That we need to work towards abolishing abortion. The Republican Party, their very first platform was abolishing slavery. They didn't want to regulate it. They abolished it.
Right.
And so Republicans should be the party of equal rights. We're the party of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We want to be the party of justice.
Right.
That's a winning message right there.
Yeah.
Equal rights for the unborn. We want equal rights for everybody.
Right.
And so I do think that as we have more conversations, the conversations that I've had with people who are against this, it's been fun to see just like the light bulb come on and just realize, there's a lot of logical inconsistencies in my worldview and in my thought process on this.
Yeah.
And all it takes sometimes is just kind of just a few facts here and there, and they realize, you know what, I think I've been thinking about this wrong. And that's okay to admit, because we all are wrong about things. I have been certain on certain things and find out later, oh yeah, I guess I was wrong about that.
Right.
It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. If you were to look at the statistics of the North Dakota abortions and all that, I'm sure it'd probably be staggering to even in a small state and where we have mostly, like you said, a near abortion ban. It'd be surprising to see the amount that it still happens. We've talked with like Dakota Hope Clinic and people like that, and this is something that they're fighting every single day or working with, however you want to view it. They're working with it a lot. So it's still definitely should be a concern for Republicans. that was, I want to read a couple more points on it. Pretty soon we get to the part where it just closes out, and we don't need to go through all that. But continuing on, whereas medical abortion is readily accessible to all citizens, regardless of state law, and now accounts for the vast majority of all abortions, and whereas abortion will remain widespread and legal in North Dakota as long as abortions can be self-administered with impunity. And those two were 2 points that were also that bulk of it, right? In those 3 sections right there, that's really interesting. We kind of already talked about how it's already accessible. You mentioned you can get off the internet. The internet has, with all of its good, there's definitely been a lot of bad. But then the second portion is that self-administered deal. What can be done to get rid of that, the ability to self-administer some of that stuff?
Well, I mean, I think that some women who are determined to abort their baby, they're not going to be stopped. We can't probably eliminate all of it.
Yeah.
But I think education goes a long way, and I think the law is a teacher. I think the law is a deterrent, because I've heard from women who have said that they wish that there would have been a legal boundary for them specifically, because it would have kept them from making the biggest mistake of their lives.
Right.
So the law needs to be clear, what is right and wrong, and it can be a teacher. And so I think, we need to start from there. And then that's where all of our pro-life organizations can come in, and they do a fantastic job of educating and helping women and saving lives. I mean, they're just fantastic.
Right.
So I think the more that people realize that this is happening, the more they realize how dangerous these abortion pills are, the more lives we're going to save.
Right. Absolutely. Education. It sounds like that's where a lot of it falls down to.
Well, we can't rely just on education. We need to have justice within our law.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. But it sounds like there's a lot of people that are getting, and even talking with Dakota Hope Clinic, there's a lot of people that go down that path because they feel like it's the only option.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's probably the easiest option, perhaps, in some cases, but it's definitely not the only option. And so with the law as a deterrent, it forces them to get education, because they're going to have to do some type of research.
Right.
Absolutely. So basically, the next steps for this comes up on April 5th and 6th, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be brought to the floor there, and we already kind of mentioned it, but it'll need a 2/3 majority vote to get through, and then it would be part of the political cycle for this year. It'll be top of mind in voters and hopefully legislators.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and like I said, I do think that this is a future
Yeah.
of the pro-life movement, as we just get more educated and just strive to be more ideologically consistent,
Right.
and fight for life with integrity and honor.
So obviously a huge part of this is the abolishing it, but there is a portion of this where you guys are just looking for consistency.
Right. Yeah. And we won't ever ban abortion until we have equal protection.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to go to Washington, D.C. and be on the steps of the Supreme Court when they were deliberating Dobbs. And we were holding up signs that said equality begins in the womb. And it's a great slogan, but we won't ever have equality in the womb unless we have equal protection under the law, unless the unborn has equal rights, and they don't as of right now. Yeah. Even in North Dakota, they do not have equal rights. Right.
There's a lot of people that fight for the moms and maybe parents, but it's good to have people that fight for the kids as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we need to both. I mean, I am all for, we need to love them both. The father as well, have a holistic approach, but the law does not reflect what we say we believe in. We need to fix that.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out on April 5th and 6th in Fargo. Appreciate you coming on today. Any thing else that you'd like to add? I think we've covered it pretty comprehensively.
Yeah, I think so. I think even if it doesn't pass, it's been a great conversation starter, and I don't think that it will end there.
Yeah. The conversation won't die in April. I don't know what day. Do you know which day it's going to be voted on?
I think the 6th.
The 6th. Yeah. So the conversation won't die then. Probably something that will be around for other conventions or maybe even some resolutions?
Maybe some legislation. We'll see.
Yeah, legislation. Absolutely. So, well, again, thank you for coming on today. It's been very interesting. If anybody has any questions, what would be the best place for them to reach out to?
They can email me at info@ndcan.org. Absolutely.
Very good. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been another edition of the Dakota's Election Central, where we are comprehensively covering the 2024 North Dakota election cycle. I'm Jonathan Starr. You can go to mydakotan.com, click on Election Central. There you'll see other interviews just like the one you just watched with candidates, about resolutions, with key players in the different parties in North Dakota. So thank you for watching. Have a great day.